What's up, do-it-yourselfers? Thanks for tuning in to Small Engine Repair Channel, where our main goal is to make sure you know that you have the ability to fix or repair whatever you want to take on.
Alright, welcome back to episode 3 of this vintage motorcycle restoration of a Honda CT90. We're going to recap some clips from the previous 2 episodes of this classic bike rebuild, and we're going to drain some oil, kind of show us bringing it back to life here. We put a brand new carburetor on this old vintage Honda, but kept the patina as it is being used as an elk hunting unit. So yeah, if you got questions about that, leave it in the comments. We're going to start here, guys, by installing our drain plug. This is the main drain plug on this old classic trail bike, and you don't want to have to tighten these things super tight. We're going into aluminum here, and hang on till the very end as we go on for the first ride in this thing in over a decade. We're going to move on to adding oil here. If anybody had questions on the second drain plug, check out episode 2, as we installed that last week in episode 2. We're using a 10W40 motorcycle oil here. Even if my bottle doesn't read that, I use a generic or universal bottle. We're not just a DIY basic shop. We have a barrel of oil, so that's what we use. But as you can see here, we still need to add some. We're going to add a little bit more here, and boom, we are right full mark here, as you can tell. And yeah, all right, we're going to move on after putting our dipstick back into rear tire tube install. We wanted to keep some of the patina and retro vintage look on this thing by keeping the old tire. It wasn't that bad yet, but however, we could not get it to hold air whatsoever, so we had to put a new tube in this thing. We're going to start by removing the carter pin out of the axle nut, and as you can tell, this one was pretty old. It was kind of a booger to get out. If you guys have any questions on how to get those out, let me know. I can do a little video on that. We're going to spray a little lube on these threads because they haven't been out in decades, and boom. As you can tell, these things are double nutted. We're going to take the outside nut off first, and then we're going to go to the inside nut after that. And I'm just using a crescent wrench. If you don't like that, I don't care. It's what I do every day on these things. I've been taking axles off since I was about 12 years old. So anyways, probably younger than that actually. We're going to keep going here. Secondary nut removed. And we're going to take the adjuster slide off, move the chain somewhat forward, and try to get the chain off of the sprocket. Take the secondary chain adjuster slide off and remove the axle out of the wheel itself. And yeah, just kind of gradually roll forward. As you guys can tell here, this chain will slide right off. These are trickier than a lot of other dirt bikes or anything that if you're normally used to working on motorcycles or dirt bikes at all. As you can tell, these are a puck system, to where that whole sprocket hub goes into the wheel with cogs and teeth, or what I call pucks. So in the way I took this whole thing apart to get it apart was to take the rear brake adjuster completely, the rear adjuster nut completely off, take the linkage out of the actual engagement arm on the brake drum, and that'll release basically the whole rear wheel, so, and give you enough clearance to where you can get that sprocket hub out as well. So if anybody can hear my corgi growling in the background, I apologize about that, but we are having a corgi wrestling match right now that I'm trying to keep under tabs. But either way, as you guys can tell, we are still removing linkages off the rear brakes on this thing. Oops, I broke a carter pin. I guess that was my fault, rookie mistake, but we're still going to be able to remove it, get it out. But this was the main brake hold arm on the drum that doesn't allow the drum to move when you hit the brakes, basically. So if you know drum brakes, you know what I'm talking about, but most things in today's age are a disc brake. So if we're working on this old vintage retro stuff, the drum brake stuff is still kind of cool. I did have to lift up the rear just a little bit to get the tire out to clear the fender. No big deal. If you got any type of strength at all, you know what we're doing here. So I'm going to lube both ends of the tires. Anybody else like to play music? I play drums, obviously. If you do, leave it in the comments down there. So we're going to start with a little penetrating oil around the beads, kind of work it down in there the best as possible. Like I said, this tire is, from what I could tell, the original tire. So, and I didn't know how stiff it was going to be or how pliable it was going to be. It ended up being not too incredibly bad, but I've had a lot of these older tires to where they are a pain in the beep to get debeaded. So we're just gonna basically use a little penetrating oil to our advantage and let it soak in there. Then we're gonna remove the valve stem nut, and we gotta get the right tool for that first. It should just be a 12 millimeter on these. I've never seen an inner tube that wasn't a 12 millimeter, but if yours is, sorry. Anyways, we're gonna move on to tire spoons here. Like I said, anybody else like to twirl their tools? What a goob. Leave it in the comments if anybody else likes to play music or what your hobbies are besides working on stuff and old vintage bikes like I do. So, and we don't work on just vintage bikes. We got a lot of videos coming out, guys. We got quad videos, rider videos, chainsaw videos, snowblower videos, so many wood splitter videos. I couldn't go on about all the videos we got coming out. Anyways, as you guys can see here, to get this old tire off, we just started at one end and worked our way around the circle. If you notice in the very beginning, I used both spoons at first, and I held one spoon down and used the other one as my workaround, basically. If you let both out, a lot of times it'll let the bead back in and just becomes a pain, and I just get one lip or one bead above the rim, and then it's time to pull the tube out. We already removed our valve stem nut, I went ahead and pushed the valve stem into the wheel once we got to this point, and then we pulled the tube out of the wheel. So not too rocket science stuff here, but yeah, if you've ever changed a bicycle tube, it's very similar to that, just a lot more aggressive style. So we don't really have to be too worried about being too aggressive with our tire spoons when taking the old tube out, as it is already torn. But if you want to have any luck at putting your new tube in, you definitely want to make sure that you are very careful when putting your new tube in, as it is very, very easy to pop a tube. Ask me how I know. Over the last 20 years, I can't tell you how many I've popped. So as you can tell, this one was just dry rotted right at the valve stem, right at the base. And that's something I really commonly see with older tubes in general. So a little trick I do is I put a little bit of air in it, and in this demonstration I probably put a little too much, but it just helps with getting the tube in there the right way without it folding over or wrinkling or any mishaps that could take place inside that tire when we're trying to go inside that tire. And we don't want it to roll over on itself or pinch or anything. So there's nothing more frustrating to me anyways than putting a brand new tube in an old tire and basically getting it all beaded and whatnot, and putting air in for the first time and it hissing at you like a cat. So that makes me really, really angry when that happens. Anyways, we're checking the wheel for any type of defects here, making sure no spokes are poking through or anything else. And yeah, it didn't look like anything really crucial was here. I'm also feeling, as you can tell with that gesture I just made with my hand on the inside of the tire, I'm feeling for any thorns or screws or anything that I could have missed that could potentially pop this brand new inner tube that we're about to put in. So I'm gonna try to line up my valve stem with the hole on the rim, as you guys can tell, as I pointed out there, and we're just gonna start working our tube inside the tire here. One thing I am careful about here is I'm working the tube on the other side of the wheel. I'm trying not to allow any inner tube between the tire surface and the wheel surface. I want that inner tube all the way in the wheel valley is what I call it. So if you got another term for it, leave it down in the comments. Notice I'm trying to get those comments up lately, guys. Anyway, working on the valve stem, getting it through the valve stem hole here in the wheel. No big deal, we got it through there. We're gonna put the nut on now so I don't have to worry about that thing coming back out and trying to fish it through later. That is a very frustrating task as well. Ask me how I know. Alright, so I probably should have put a little more penetrating oil on this before I started, but we're going to go ahead and start here. And this can be a tedious process, especially on an older tire, but with tire spoons, you just have to make sure you're getting just the edge of the spoon in. You guys have to pardon me, a customer called there, so we had to move this to another table actually. But yeah, this is going to be a time-lapse version of how I got this tire on. As you can see, I get my fingertips in there. I'm feeling the inner tube to make sure it's not going to pinch anywhere between the tire and the wheel. I'm also getting my tire spoons just the minimal amount onto the wheel surface that I need to, so I'm not pinching any inner tube. At the very, very end of this, I'm going to wedge the tire separate from the wheel to make sure there's no inner tube between the wheel and the tire before putting air in it, and boom, we have a sealed tire. Thank you for the help, Lindsay. She is a phenomenal help, and she cameos and helps out a lot in these videos. We're going to keep on the tire installation here. As you guys can tell, these things can be a little bit of a booger, but you just got to keep at it. Put the sprocket on first. Make sure all your spacers and plates are on how it came apart. Yours could be a little different than ours. I know the years variations on these change slightly, so if yours is different, I'm sorry, but this is how ours was. So this one had a spacer in between the frame and the sprocket hub, and on the other side it had the brake drum, and then about a 1 inch thick bushing between the brake drum and the frame. So make sure you get your bushings in order. If you don't, your stuff will kink or bind and it will not work right at all. So the key way to tell this too is it won't go together right, first off, but second off, your chain will look very cockeyed if your bushings are off. So you can see here I greased up the axle just a little bit. I wanted to go ahead and start working the chain around slightly. Went ahead and put my secondary nut on there just to kind of hold the sprocket hub in, and we're going to start sliding the axle actually into the wheel itself here. I figured I should be a better YouTuber and get you guys a better angle on what we're doing here, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you like the other angle, let me know, or if there's anything you guys think we can improve on these videos that you'd like to see more, let me know. But as you can see here, we're going to start working the axle into the actual rear wheel. This can be kind of a struggle, especially with this style of bike, but this is a tight fit and you just got to work it. Be nice and patient with it, and make sure it gets through all the bushings correctly in the brake drum, and if you have seals you're working through or anything else, wheel spacers, you know, depending on what you're working on. But you can see our spacers in there now. I didn't get a good shot of getting it in there, sorry guys, but we're going to go ahead and get the adjuster slide on there now. But go ahead and put the nut on so that stuff can't move too much while we're finishing up the brake linkage installation and whatnot here. And I'm not going to tighten this thing up super tight yet, and the reason is because stuff's still got to move. I want to adjust this chain, I want to get the brake linkage in, and so we're just going to kind of finger tight it, not super tight yet, but we will put a final oomph on this thing at the very end after we get everything assembled here. So we are going to move on now to making sure we get all of our stuff kind of correctly installed. I don't want to get everything tightened or start tightening anything or assemble anything more and have stuff that I have to go back on. So I want to make sure that nut and that groove is all in there perfectly, and if I can get this chain slide in there and hold in there to not move as well, because this will help keep your wheel straight if you can get your chain adjusters in there without it moving. So this one ended up being a little bit problematic if I recall, so ended up moving to the other side and putting the brake linkage together next. Stay tuned for that, and also make sure you guys do stay tuned to the very end of this video. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to take this thing for a spin for the first time, and I'm going to say probably over 20 years that it's actually been ridden. So I moved over to the other side here, and basically what happened here, guys, is I didn't have the bushing in correct, and I was taking my own advice. We took it apart and put the nut back on. Also, washer sequence was a little different than how I took it, or remember taking it apart, so we put the washer sequence on there too. So moving on to brake linkage installation here, we have the roller pin in there. We're going to put our main brake arm linkage arm into that, and then I'm just going to tighten it to where basically I remembered it being. If you guys paid attention to when I spun it off, it wasn't too incredibly tight on there at all, but when you're taking these things apart, if you can kind of pay attention to how many threads you got sticking out, or sometimes you can even mark it with a marker, that way you know where to put it back. But that I just counted about, I don't know, 5 to 7 threads, and we called her good. The other thing was, I didn't know if these brakes were even going to be an adjustment, being how long this thing sat, and so I had a hunch we were going to be doing some brake adjustments anyways, so I wasn't too worried about where exactly it needed to be. So we're going to hook the locking bolt up here to the drum, see if we can zoom in a little better, actually get you guys a better vantage point of how that works here. And it goes through the back of the hub, through the lock arm, and then just a nut on it. Nothing too crucial here, but as mentioned before, what this does is it locks the drum in the wheel from spinning, so when you hit your brakes, the whole drum doesn't actually, or the inner piece of the brake doesn't spin when you hit your brakes, and it actually, you know, is what locks, and That'll, once your brake pads expand and it's not spinning, that's what stops your rear wheel. So now that we have all the brake stuff and everything kind of assembled, I'm going to put the final kibosh and tighten on this nut. The last thing, I don't think I got in the video clip here, was actually putting the carter pin in this thing. And we want to make sure you do get your carter pin in this thing, is if you're going trail riding and you lose one of these nuts, the other one can come off pretty darn easily. And yeah, it's no bueno at that point, as your rear wheel falls off the bike. So not good. So we're gonna move on to the last and final thing here, guys. Brake lever installation. I know this is probably one of the most boring parts of this video, but maybe not if you need to know how to do this. So this is a 10mm pin bolt that goes through the main thing. As you can see, this lever here was broken. There is a slot in the top of the lever that lets the eyelet of the cable release. You just turn it and boom, there we go. This wasn't the exact same lever, but it sure worked. And yeah, I believe this was off a Yamaha or something, I can't recall, but I do like to put a little grease on the pin on these things. Sorry, got behind the text there. Editing failure and hashtag mechanic/YouTube newbie live. Anyways, pin through the lever. We're gonna go down there and put the lock nut on the bottom. Not super difficult stuff here. There's not an adjuster really or anything on the top side of these, and once it's in there, that's the front brake lever, guys. So all right, it's the time we've all been waiting for. First fire of this thing. Well, not first fire, but first ride, that's for sure. You can see we had a little carbon buildup on her. She had to clean out. She was smoking pretty good at first. And I'll be quiet here as we're gonna take this old vintage Honda for a ride, and I kind of want you guys to be able to hear it. So I'll keep my blinders.
I got that on video. That was the saddest sound. Angus is barking.
How about the vintage sound on that thing, guys? Pardon my goon riding. Side note, I have been riding dirt bikes since probably about the time I could walk, so if you see me acting a little goofy here, just know it's all for the skid. We sure appreciate you guys staying and watching this whole retro rebuild we did on this old Honda. It was sure fun bringing this old thing back to life. And yeah, there it is, guys. First ride on this thing in probably over 10-20 years. I know the guy that got it, that let us work on it, he said it was just found in a barn, and he paid a guy what he paid the guy, and it's been sitting for a long time. So look at the patina on this thing. All right, well, thanks again. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.